Do you think ChatGPT being down and Grok over the weekend was something that they wanted? They don't have the ability to scale. If they're going down at peak times because somebody started creating a bunch of Ghiblies or whatever the hell they call them, why? Because it's absolutely impossible for us to scale with conventional infrastructure. For whatever reason, we willingly give up our data. So if you're using ChatGPT and you're using their documents intelligence piece, your IP will be owned by ChatGPT. And that's a major issue.
What was the core inspiration for something like Flux?
And I started to see what was happening with healthcare organizations in Google. I was like, this is a major problem. Not only are they going to have your healthcare information, everything you shop, where you visit, where you vacation, they're going to garner all of your data. And maybe you're okay with that, but you should be incentivized for that. Flux stores no data. We store nothing. They're talking about doing good when doing evil in the background.
And I guess like healthcare going forward, it would be sort of like biometric or even DNA data and things like that.
They'll know you inside and out and then some. I mean, you look at the 23andMe, they're bankrupt now. That data is going to be sold to somebody and they're going to train AI models with it and so on and so forth. So your data is going to be in AI whether you like it or not. And that's just unacceptable.
What do you think the response will be from the big tech guys for something like this?
Welcome to We Are DePIN, a podcast focused on the world of DePIN projects. Each episode, we invite projects to discuss how they are revolutionizing the world of DePIN and Web3. Our goal is to keep you informed about everything happening in the DePIN space through insightful discussions. This podcast is brought to you by Minima, the embedded blockchain. Minima is a fully decentralized layer 1 blockchain that can embed and run a full node on edge devices. Minima is not just another blockchain. It's a fundamental shift in how decentralized networks can operate. Its lightweight architecture allows it to run a full node on chip on any mobile or IoT device, making it exceptionally adaptable to scaling any decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Minima's technology is now being supported by an expansive and engaged community of over 50,000 node operators. So join us for this next insightful discussion and enjoy the episode.
Daniel, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me on today. I appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. And before we press record, I told you how honored I am to have you on the podcast, because what personally got me into the whole DePIN space was applications like yourselves, and also decentralized storage and decentralized compute generally, because I saw all these big players like Google, Amazon, basically powering the internet and getting exponentially larger and getting more, exponentially more powerful. And when, providers like yourselves come along and actually give that power back to the individuals and back to people and allow them to profit from the increase of the internet and the expansion of the internet, I really like that, because it shows that the regular person can compete with these big guys. So yeah, very, very honored to have you on. I really want to start the questions with, I guess, what got you started in the whole decentralized space?
Yeah, so thank you, and again for having me on. So I'm excited about what Web3 and DePIN is becoming, and honestly, we were DePIN before DePIN was cool. So you go back to 2017, there were some major deplatformings happening, and as we were rolling out Zelle, which is the original version of Flux, we were looking at how do we take the control out of the big data centers, because really that has become an ongoing and continues to be an ongoing issue moving forward. So our goal was to create something that we could scale infinitely. So we took a lot of the projects that were attempting to scale, like Ethereum and so on and so forth, and we built it from the ground up. We said, how do we utilize our additional compute resources? I mean, really, it comes down to that's Satoshi Nakamoto's biggest quandary, is what do we do with this additional compute resources? I am a proof of work guy, so I believe if it's going to be decentralized, it has to be ASIC resistant, it has to be proof of work. So what we did was we worked on creating proof of useful work, which allows people to mine whatever cryptocurrency they like, but also participate in useful work, which is the additional compute resources can be utilized for AI, edge compute, front ends, back ends, game servers. So at that particular point in time, the craze was master nodes. And we know the node networks work because Bitcoin has their own node networks and they're not incentivized. So what we did is we took and we forked Bitcoin and we created Flux, which was built, our layer 2 was our nodes. So those deterministic nodes that run on Flux's network are enterprise grade infrastructure. So Essentially, what it does is it allows everyday people to participate in the network. Bitcoin was a solution for a problem that didn't want to be fixed. The financial legacy networks, they resisted it wholeheartedly. What we found, and as we build this out, is that's indicative to the financial sector, but it's not indicative to the rest of the tech sector. So the standard tech stack model. So, whether it's EMR or whether it's supply chain management or whatever it is, they're looking for a solution. So what we did is we built the platform so anybody can use it, anybody can participate it. We have our nomenclature is, for the people, by the people. And essentially what it does is it puts these big these data companies, the AWSs of the world, the Googles of the world, so on and so forth, puts them on notice. And the notice is this, the paradigm is shifting very quickly. And as a matter of fact, we'll talk about AI later on, and I'll expand on why, projects like Flux are so imperative to scale AI appropriately. So what that did is we surveyed the scene and we looked and said, what's the difference between the haves and have-nots? Well, you have the haves, which are the, X, Amazon, so on and so forth. The majority of H100s deploy there, H200s deploy there. They get first crack at cards. They build their own data centers out. And guess what? They still can't scale appropriately. Grok was down over the weekend. ChatGPT was down over the weekend. They couldn't handle the influx of request calls. So really what Flux looked to do was create a wetland for those. So we essentially will provide those overflow compute resources or regular compute resources for entry-level retail. And really what this did was give us an opportunity to essentially make decentralized infrastructure decentralized again. Because it's very difficult to say you're DePIN or a decentralized project if you're housing all your backends on AWS, and that creates a single point of failure. AWS doesn't like your politics, or maybe you're a competitor to them. Guess what? You don't have a place anymore. With Flux, it's immutable. So once you've deployed on Flux, it's on Flux forever, and it really puts the power back in the hands of the people.
Yeah, it's something that is always brought up when people think about dApps and decentralized products, and you sort of go layer back, and you can see that a lot of their infrastructure is actually hosted on AWS, and it's like it's a difficult one. You can't say that you're decentralized when you have that single point of failure, as you say.
Yep.
But it's extremely common. I'd say it's more common than it isn't.
I would say 99.5% of the projects that are claiming to be DePIN are centralized in the end. So I would say the ones that have deployed on something like Flux or Akash or IONet or something of that nature, then they're decentralized from the base up. So I mean, really, what it comes down to strategic planning for DePIN providers to understand that hey, our biggest value add is our retention of data. And if our retention of data is hosted on, a Web 2 legacy infrastructure, it's just not decentralized. So, Flux runs, we're in 80 countries all over the world. We've got 15,000 decentralized nodes that run, 25,000 plus applications. We do front ends, back ends, game servers. We have Flux AI, Flux Edge, which is our edge compute model for GPUs. And what we really did is we had to sit down and figure out how to build a framework, a delivery model that we could start to drop these pieces into. And we have that built now. So that's why it's taken us about 6 years to really get to a point where we're starting to, I say we're the oldest startup ever in the history of tech, because we understood very early on as technologists that we needed to make the user interface clean and concise and clear for people to utilize the products. And by the way, we struggle with that in the DePIN space.
Oh, I couldn't agree more.
So whether you're using AWS or whether you're using, Azure or something of that nature, the user interface feels the same. So it's an easy traverse for people that have already deployed in Web 2 or as you were alluding to, Web 2.5, right? Which is, they kind of have their foot in centralized. They're trying to head toward decentralized. It allows those folks to traverse fairly seamlessly.
Yeah, I want to take a small step back, Daniel, and because there's so many different motivations for something like Flux. For instance, taking power away from the big tech guys who are getting more powerful, or providing sort of a easier way for dApps to actually truly be decentralized, or even cost savings, or even environmental impact? There's a lot of different things here that you guys could be hitting on. What was the core inspiration for something like Flux?
I spent the first 25 years of my career centralizing everything. So I was in the C-suite, CIO. It was all about your data centers, your data lakes. You wanted to control your data. Then along comes Web 2 that starts to disrupt that. And, Web 2 didn't supplant on-prem. On-prem still exists today, but Web 2 acts as an augmentation piece to that. So as I went through that first part of my career, I was like, this is all well and good. But then as I started getting to the tail end of my career and I started to see what was happening with healthcare organizations and Google, I was like, this is a major problem. Not only are they going to have your healthcare information, everything you shop, where you visit, where you vacation, your hobbies, your interests, they're gonna garner all of your data. And maybe you're okay with that, but you should be incentivized for that, right? So that should be an opt-in process, not an opt-out. So what I did was it was kind of an epiphany. As I sat down with the co-founders and I said, look, guys, I said, we have a major problem. The problem is that we're relying on major data centers to supply our infrastructure for what we call decentralized, and that just doesn't work. And that gave birth to Flux. So, we worked on, building out our deterministic nodes, our infrastructure. We had to build things from scratch because things that were built in Web 2 don't necessarily traverse to Web 3. I'll give you a perfect example is two-factor authentication. How do you have a decentralized protocol but utilize Google for your two-factor authentication? So we had to create, decentralized two-factor authentication, which ties back to the blockchain. We had to create pseudo-anonymous IDs. So how do we participate in this ecosystem and outside this ecosystem with not giving your information or your data away? And by the way, Flux stores no data. Any of our platforms, and we store nothing. We harvest nothing. We utilize nothing. It is all your data. You can choose how you want to use it, and if you want to use it, and that's the key. So, I think I'm a cypherpunk at heart. I've always been a cypherpunk at heart, and as I worked in the big tech arenas, I realized very easily that these folks are as Elon would say. They're talking about doing good when doing evil in the background. So to me, it was like we have to break this wheel. We have to change this paradigm. And that's exactly why Flux was created, because we're not going to do the bright and shiny. So, DePIN, NFTs, meme coins, whatever. You guys concentrate on that. But we'll give you the infrastructure in the background to make you decentralized from the beginning, from the outset. And that's really why it was born.
That's really interesting. So it started from basically healthcare data being stored by the likes of Google, and I guess like healthcare going forward, it would be sort of like biometric or even like DNA data and things like that. It's there's a lot of different. Yeah, it's everything. It's everything.
They'll know you inside and out and then some. I mean, you look at the 23andMe. They're bankrupt now. That data is going to be sold to somebody, and they're going to use it, and they're going to garner it, and they're going to train AI models with it, and so on and so forth. So your data is going to be in AI whether you like it or not, and that's just unacceptable. I mean, we wouldn't accept this anywhere else for any service out there, but for whatever reason, we willingly give up our data. And I'm talking about IP as well. So if you're using ChatGPT and you're using their documents intelligence piece, your IP will be owned by ChatGPT. They will house it, and that's a major issue. It's glorious for the big borgs. And the other thing is, AI was just kind of a dream back then, but we understood those who control the input models will control the output models. And we knew the only way to build an infrastructure that couldn't be controlled by the evil empires was to create something that the people owned and governed themselves. And that's really where Flux came into play.
So you're saying, obviously, that data is going to be out there, but just let the individual be able to actually profit from that data, because right now
or not like me, I would.
It's up to them. It's up to them.
Yeah. I would choose never to
I'm completely with you, but people like they like convenience, right? That's the
yes.
They like
so, and that's a perfect example. Convenience comes at a cost most often, but it doesn't have to. That's the way it's been designed. I always tell people, if you can't figure out what the yield is on a project, you're the yield, right? You're the one that's actually the dollars and cents, right? If they don't have a revenue generation model, you're the revenue generation model.
If you're not the customer, you're the user. Sorry, if you're not the customer, then you're the product.
You're the product.
Yeah, very, very good point. So going back to Flux, how does Flux sort of empower the next wave of DePIN applications or dApps?
And I think it's fundamentally whether you're using Flux or some of the other providers that are doing it in a decentralized manner. And by the way, I would say Flux is the only one that truly has the model that works because we're proof of work. Keeps us completely decentralized. Our consensus mechanism, transactional validator, everything runs through our blockchain. I often tell people that, Flux is a tech company that happens to utilize the blockchain. And instead of the other way around, everybody will tell you, hey, we're a crypto company and, it's a speculatory asset. We may have a white paper and a dream. Flux doesn't give, two shits about that. What we care about is essentially providing the tool set to the users so that they can basically facilitate this themselves. Again, it's not bright and sexy, but it is absolutely imperative for us to, iterate to the next version of, what Web3 is. And really what Web3 is ultimately the version of the internet that we visioned it at the beginning, at the outset.
Yeah. Is this for every, vertical of DePIN and dApps? Or would you say it's specific to certain verticals that maybe work better with a solution like this?
I think it's for every single piece of developmental Web3 DePIN infrastructure should be running on something like Flux from the outset. I mean, if somebody could tell you, hey, bigger, faster, better, cheaper, and by the way, it's completely decentralized, it should be a no-brainer for people to go out there and deploy that.
And that was my next question, because as you said, it's even the cost savings that we've not really spoken about at all. It is, even with you guys, but like all the other players that are in a similar space, it's a fraction of the cost of what AWS and like Google Cloud, for instance, charge. So add on top of that, security, scalability, lack of outages, and all these different things that you guys would provide. What do you think is the barrier when it comes to uptake of solutions like yourselves?
Yeah, I want to expand on it just for a second. Essentially, Flux does it a little bit different. So let's say you deploy a server on AWS. Middle of the road, mid-tier server, you're going to look at about $150 a month, right? Does not come with disaster recovery, does not come with continuity planning, does not come with, user interface, and most often charges you for egress, which is expensive, right? I mean, ask anybody that's out there using cloud networks today at scale, and they'll tell you egress is the bane of their existence. That's when you get that surprise bill in the mail, and it's $10,000 over what you anticipated it to be. You don't have that with Flux. So that when Flux, if you deploy that same infrastructure, you're going to get 3 servers, which means you have immediate DRP out of the box, disaster recovery protocol. You can geolocate it, so you can select where it is. Maybe there's some regulatory challenges where you need to be deployed in specific areas and not in other areas. Not a problem with Flux. You can pick that out. So what we did is we looked for a solution so that small to mid-tier businesses could actually out of the box have like a holistic technology plan. And we've been extremely successful with that. Because small businesses who've never been able to afford maybe a continuity planning structure or DRP, they get it out of the box. So the uptake for customers out there that are finding Flux for the first time, they're like, where the hell has this been? Because this changes the game. We provide a superior level of infrastructure and technology at a fraction of the price. 3 servers. Hold on, 3 servers.
Can I just ask you about that one specific thing? Well, how come you guys can offer that additional thing at a lower cost? Because it sounds too good to be true. Well,
you have to go back to as cloud infrastructure started to develop. Amazon essentially developed AWS internally for their own infrastructure. And as they were building it out, they said, well, wait a minute, if we have this additional resources, maybe we just resell it. Now AWS accounts for about 45% of Amazon's income, yearly, so, which is fairly substantial. So they took a byproduct of building their framework and they sold that out. We did the exact same thing, but instead of having to build data centers, we utilized people that already had infrastructure out there. Musk made a quote the other day. He said, every computer is part of the network, right? And so what we did is we isolated that and provided legacy folks who have been running legacy infrastructure to be able to deploy on Flux and be incentivized with it. So we pay our individuals for their additional compute resources or whatever they've placed on the network as it mines. So they're being incentivized as they're deploying infrastructure. And in return, we can take that compute resources, which is now a surplus of compute resources, and we can basically sell that for cheap. We can allow people to develop on it very seamlessly. And the community is the governing body that really works around that. So, you kind of think of Flux as it's the open source, anybody can use it. It's open to all, develop, deploy. And then we have Influx, which is a parent company, which works on building products on top of that.
But sorry, I interrupted your previous answer. I know you're going to go on to, barrier to adoption.
I think the biggest thing for barrier of adoption is just education. We're not seeing that barrier now as much as we saw it, like, say, last year or the year before, because people with the economic kind of downturn or, drawdown, people are looking for the same level of IT services at a cheaper cost. And there comes Flux. And once they've realized that they can do everything on Flux that they're already doing on AWS, the majority of our, Fortune 500 companies who have deployed on Flux, they'll deploy something. And they'll say, okay, we're going to deploy something, we're going to test it out, and we're going to load balance between these two things. So let's say 90% of their info is running on their legacy infrastructure, and then 10% is running on Flux. And then what you see is that quite quickly ratchets down to where suddenly you're at 50-50. You're load balancing between these two things, or they're using it for overflow. They need additional compute resources, and now they have somewhere to scale instantaneously should they need it. So I think the uptake or people actually onboarding has gotten much more simplistic, and we have a really rock solid revenue generation project or strategy behind that to incentivize not only the people that are building out that infrastructure, but the people that are developing on that infrastructure as well.
So you put it down to education, because from my side, as just playing like devil's advocate, if it is the same service in terms of a user experience point of view, or even better, as you said,
I would say it's better at this point. Yeah, I would say it's better.
But then, like, the cost saving is it is a fraction of what these big guys are doing. Plus the decentralized element that you just mentioned. Even if you take out the decentralized element, I know a lot of people don't care about that. Like, is it just education, or would you say it's something else?
Well, one thing that we don't do well in the blockchain space is user interface development, so UI UX. And so we knew very early on. My wife goes to the ATM, she puts her credit card in, she puts her PIN in, she takes her money, she takes her receipt, and she leaves. She doesn't care about anything that happened behind the scenes. And essentially, most organizations in this world or end users in this world are exactly the same way. So we had to make this look and feel just like Web 2. So the creature comforts that they're very used to. And that's what really took so long to get us out of the developmental phase and into the practical application phase was, how do we traverse this ecosystem? Because people, if they come to your product and they attempt to use it and it doesn't deliver, they won't come back. So, and by the way, that word will spread, and it works the exact opposite way. If you allow people to come to your infrastructure and they use it and it's seamless, they're going to share that with other people as well. And I would say 90% of what we get in terms of enterprise customers are all referral. People that have developed on top of, somebody developed on and said, told so-and-so who told so-and-so, and now they come to us and like, yeah, we can help you with that.
Yeah. I was looking at the sort of stats behind, I guess, the infrastructure behind the internet, which is where you guys would lie. And the number is still quite small in terms of the whole internet and how much of it is powered by decentralized solutions such as yourselves. I think it is less than 1%, or even like maybe around 1%. Do you think now is that sort of turning point where the growth will increase, the adoption will increase?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if we were going to a baseball game, we're not even left the house yet. I mean, it is very early, very entry level, and projects that are already thinking about it long term are the ones that are going to be ahead of the curve. All my CIO friends out there, I tell them all the time, I'm like, if you guys aren't looking into DePIN, if you're not looking at utilizing Flux, you're going to really be sorry, because you're going to pay a shit ton of money for a long time to figure out that that's where you needed to be in the first place. So, I think we're at like a really pivotal time right now for DePIN, because you look at what's happening in the EU. I mean, you're going to jail if you post a meme. Come on, man. You know what I mean? There has to be a better way,
in the
and
UK.
there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry to hear that. Well, the U.S. was headed down the same path. I mean,
it was.
It used to be freedom of speech was the maximalists, right? They everybody agreed with this, and we don't see that anymore. And we see people being censored. We see their privacy being compromised. You look at, I mean, they're trying to control every facet of your life. And, I thought about my children. I got 6 kids, and I want to leave a legacy for them that we tried to give them something back to save what was happening. And I think we're finally to a point where we're actually doing that. So, I'm a cypherpunk at heart, and it really makes me tear up every time I watch somebody give up some of their civil liberties. You know what I mean? And it governed by code. So essentially, if we create, the code that governs this, and the input model is the people that are the foundation of the networks, that's where we get the holy grail. So yeah, I mean, DePIN isn't a luxury; it's a necessity at this point.
And we'll definitely talk about AI soon, because it's interesting is that sort of development and how that sort of plays into this wave. But yes, keeping on this, I'm interested to hear your take in terms of what you think the response will be from the big tech guys for something like this.
They're not impressed with us, I'll tell you that. The reason they're not impressed with it is we're about to shake up their entire pricing structure and their dynamics. Now, you have industry leaders who have got ahead of it. So we work with Lumen, we work with OVH, we work with SUSE, so on and so forth. These are big players in the space that already acknowledge that we need to get our Lumen, who wants to compete directly with AWS, looks at reselling Flux's products to allow them to essentially take part of that market share. And global compute is multi-trillion-dollar market, and we're not even at 1% yet. I mean, my projection is, for Flux internally is 1% of the global compute market, which is billions, right? So, and we can easily get there. It's not a heavy lift. But we have to have not only the people that are building that infrastructure, but the people that are developing on that infrastructure. They have to have the dedication to actually keep it decentralized. So, I see a lot of DePINs that are basically trying to recreate something that was created in Web 2, and they're putting a fancy, DePIN behind it, and they're calling that, innovation, and it's not. It's already existed. So, I think it comes down to this. I think you're going to have a consolidation, especially in blockchain projects, the ones that actually do something and generate revenue, and everyone else. And I think about 99% of the projects out there don't generate a dollar. Flux, we pay for all of our stuff and we make money, and that's the key. But we built it so that Google's old mantra was "Don't be evil." Flux is "Don't be evil" again. So we've built this thing for the ground up, where Dan can't do anything to this project. It is a community-based project. So even if I wanted to sell something, you can't. Most people that come into the space are like, "How do I invest in Flux?" Go buy the asset. That's how you get exposure. There's not a stock. There's no ICO, IDO, ID, whatever the acronym of the day is. You have to actually participate in the network. So.
Yeah, it distributes. This is the beauty of DePIN. It distributes the network, but also distributes like governance and power amongst people.
Yeah, and it keeps people in check. We have an XDAO that runs that. The community are super involved with the project. I would say we have one of the best communities in blockchain because we've been through multiple cycles. This is just another cycle to us. We don't care. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
like
you guys
we
have
just
been around for years. Yeah.
we keep developing the tech. And why do we do that? We're not out there beating our chests saying that, we're the next best thing in the world. We're just creating technology that actually solves the problem and gives other people the tools to solve their problems.
Daniel, let's talk about AI. So obviously it's the hot topic. Everyone's talking about it. From a philosophical point of view, technological point of view, it's in politics all the time. What is Flux doing in the AI space, and what are your sort of personal stances on the direction that we're going into?
Yeah, as we talked about earlier, those who own the input models own the output models, and with you can even see in Google's release of their Bard product, they changed history. Everybody was black. You know what I mean? It was like that really isn't history. So if you have skewed input models, so folks that are actually delivering input models that are leaning one political side or the other side, you're not necessarily getting a truth model out the other side, because AI is essentially utilizes your data input and combs it, and they give you the most for all intents and purposes at this point today, AI is glorified search engine. It's fancy and it's pretty and it's cool, but the future of what it will be is the bigger thing. And boy, I'll tell you, we are so early into AI. And our goal with Flux was we were not looking to release an AI product. I'm just going to be straight up honest with you. We weren't looking to release an AI product. But when we started doing some research on what, the data that these big ones were garnering, it was terrifying. So we actually were approached by a Fortune 100 company that said, "Can you build a version of AI that does not provide our data back to the Borg? We worry about our IP, we worry about our infrastructure. We want to make sure this is private." And this was in the healthcare arena. And we said, absolutely, this is something we can do. And we built it, and it was a byproduct of having this decentralized network. So now Flux AI does everything that ChatGPT does on steroids. So whether it's Flux Intel, we just created a program that'll basically, if you have 1,000 resumes, it'll comb the resumes and it'll bring up the top candidates for your job description and rank them appropriately. And then after you're done, you can export that, and now you have a call list. Doesn't sound like a big idea, but if you're in HR, you know exactly what a pain in the ass that's been your whole life. And now all of a sudden that's simplistic. And by the way, once that has garnered that data, analyzed that data, it goes off into the abyss. It's not stored by Flux. We store no data. We garner no data. We gather no data. We do no training models. We're using open source based products that you can see the algorithm models, the input models, and transparency is the key feature that we need moving forward in AI. There was a extreme push for to monopolize AI, and to do that, you have to basically monopolize the compute resources.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why all these H100 chips are being bought up by these big companies. Like they have the hardware.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and here's the thing. Do you think ChatGPT being down and Grok over the weekend was something that they wanted? They don't have the ability to scale. That's the issue. This isn't rocket science here, folks. If they're going down at peak times because somebody started creating a bunch of Ghiblies or whatever the hell they call them, then they haven't built out enough infrastructure, and they can't. Why? Because it's absolutely impossible for us to scale with conventional infrastructure and for the demands that AI is going to produce.
Their solution is just to buy up more chips. That's the solution.
Yeah. Well, and continue to create that monopoly, and eventually they would reach critical mass where they control it all. The problem is they're going to be stymied because, if you build a data center every day for the next 5 years, we would be fractional of what we're going to need overall. So we have to look at holistic opportunities like Flux, where people already possess those graphics cards and that infrastructure to provide back as service. Then you don't have to worry about building a data center. You don't have to worry about power sourcing, which is an absolute nightmare If you've been in crypto mining, what, you're setting up at hydro dams, you're setting up at nuclear power plants. I had a, mining farm of my own that we ran off a 3 Mile Island back in the day. And, so what if none of that was an issue? We're not worried about space. We're not worried about infrastructure. We're not worried about, it's just Dan has 3 graphics cards, maybe they're, 4070 TIs or whatever it is. I can now present them to the network, essentially mine while I'm mining, and then you do proof of use work after that. So even with Trump coming out and saying that they're going to clear the way for these data centers to be built out, it's impossible. They're not going to be able to scale it. It's infinitely growing. These are the heaviest hitters with the most infrastructure, and they're still going down. There's no way for them to hit critical mass at this point. It has to be something decentralized. It has to be something that, the users are the ones that are bearing the burden of providing power and resources, and they're being incentivized handsomely, not only from the network infrastructure itself, Flux itself, but also from the participants that are buying that compute resources. So, you really look at what Flux Edge is, it's an aggregator. That's all it is. We aggregate people that need compute resources, and we connect them with people that have compute resources in a very pseudo-anonymous, decentralized manner.
You kind of brought up 2 very big issues when it comes to the current state of AI, and one of them being that bottleneck when it comes to AI innovation of hardware currently, and the direction it's going in is monopolizing the hardware, and even then is not. It will hinder long-term exponential growth of these models. So that's number one. But the second point, which is it's equally, if not more powerfully valid to the actual person like listening and watching this podcast, is they will take your data. Like if you're using these sort of models, that's why a lot of these big companies, they either try to do like on-prem AI services, try to disconnect it from the internet as much as possible. But if that's the case, they're not benefiting from updates to the model, or they're just like not using it at all. So because they don't want their data to go to third parties, is against their practices.
Well, it would be horrible for their business if their IP fell into the hands of the wrong people.
It makes a ton of sense. So with the solutions as yourselves, which is decentralized, you guys don't scrape data, you guys don't hold any. I really don't see why this isn't talked about more as a solution, as a remedy to those big 2 issues. One from a social point of view, and one from a tech point of view.
Well, I think there always has to be a yin to the yang. And I don't see ChatGPT or Grok or Bard going anywhere anytime soon, but I do think Flux AI offers the ability to have the antithesis of what AI is becoming. And you're right, businesses need to protect their IP, and I'm not just talking about like maybe project planning or something they're doing, but if they're uploading their contracts for document intelligence or anything like that, now they know exactly what you're doing within your business model as well. And this for, high level companies who are doing development and so forth, we work with the UK government. We're rolling out, Flux AI to the UK government as well. So we're part of their they call it, I forget what it was. But anyway, they pick particular contractors, and that's who they work with. And it took us the better part of 3 weeks to explain to the UK government exactly how Flux AI worked. And in the end, it was a no-brainer. We were at it immediately. Why? Because, is the government going to use the same as ChatGPT? Are they going to use the same products that they're building and they're garnering data? No. Anyone that has, in a business that wants to protect the security and safety of their business and their organization and their strategic plans doesn't want to entrust that to somebody who's basically going to have all of your document intelligence, all of your, maybe uploaded a PowerPoint and, you're asking for it to fine tune it. Well, they have that data now. And really, why do you think Microsoft broke their necks trying to get to ChatGPT early on? Is because they understand the value add. When you can start to use analytics off of that collected data on the backside, forget about it. They're going to know everything about you, your company, your financial records, so on and so forth. It blows my mind. So, creating a product like Flux AI that decouples from that whole thought process and allows people to actually deploy and utilize all the amazing creature comforts that comes. We use Flux One for our image generation, which is absolutely fantastic. We have DeepSeek integration. We've got all these open source models that are added into it as well. So you're getting the benefit of an externally updated training model without the risk of having, you being the training model to provide that data.
Yeah, that was actually my next question, Daniel, is like, where does that data for training and continuous improvement of the model come from if it's not coming from the user?
It's coming from the company themselves. So some of these companies have, 80,000, 100,000 workers. Now, then you start getting into government and so on and so forth. They have, millions and millions of users. They have all the components internally. They just need to get them centralized. They need to get them to the point where that AI can utilize that data input models. Plus, you can garner external data training models that can then be utilized on your platform without exposing yourself to those external training models. And that's the key. And I think that's where Flux really shines, is we allow people to actually innovate and build on top. We have full API integrations. We just had somebody add us to one of their products the other day. 1.5 million users are going to have access to that, those API models, and they're going to use them. And for us, it's a win-win because it's powered by the people and it's allowing people to really focus on their privacy and security models.
Amazing. We're going to get to the end of the podcast now, Dan, but I do have one question to ask on Flux and sort of the future of DePIN. And I guess, like, where do you see the next sort of 2 to 3 years of DePIN? Maybe even longer time horizon, 5 years of DePIN, when it comes to expansion, and how I guess incremental are players like Flux in that transition?
I'll be honest with you. I don't think there's going to be anything incremental over the next several years. We're going to be aggressively moving forward with this. I personally see AI agents, like maybe a Hive mapper, where you're driving around with, a device in your car, you're reporting data back, you're being incentivized for that. Your data is going there. But if Hive mapper is garnering all that data on, AWS, then AWS has access to that as well. They say they don't, but they do, right? We all know that. If you've been in technology long enough, they do, right? This is why I tell people never to store seed phrases on, cloud compute. We had one of our own had his seed phrase stored on a cloud compute. They used a scanner. They found the private key and they ripped them off. So it happened. It happens. And I think tried and true as we build out these new. We have use cases coming that we're developing for each sector. And as that starts to really cascade around and people really start to see the value, I think you'll start to see them really move toward that. So I think you'll see us securing DePIN with something like Flux so that it's basically decentralized across the board. But I think the bigger value add is when Web 2 or legacy tech stacks start to move into DePIN and Web 3. And you're already starting to see that. So you're already starting to see large major players who understand, they knew very early on as on-prem was shifting to Web 2, we need to get involved with AWS, we need to buy Amazon, so on and so forth, because this is where the exposure is moving forward, and the rest is history. And I think we're exactly at that with DePIN as it stands today. We've built to scale, we're ready to scale, and now you're going to see that legacy tech stacks really start to get immerse themselves in that and the value add that we bring to the table.
I couldn't agree more. Daniel, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. One question I like to ask all my guests before we wrap up the podcast is, what is your favorite use case of DePIN outside of what you guys are immediately doing?
Well, it's kind of that's a loaded question because there's a lot of DePIN out there. Not all, and I'm a fan of the ones that actually build it in a decentralized manner. I think where the real value add is going to come is in healthcare. So I see healthcare DePINs that are starting to develop to tie back, whether it's IoT device management or whatever it is, in healthcare. We launched a project called FluxMed that allows basically EMR providers to provide data back to the users that they can store manually. You could see this at any level, whether it's test results or lab work or whatever. A good physical infrastructure in DePIN is going to report back to good decentralized infrastructure in DePIN.
Amazing. Daniel, we're going to wrap up the podcast there. It's been such a pleasure having you on. One of my favorite episodes so far. So thank you so much again. How can people stay in touch with you and Flux going forward? I'm sure they want to check you guys out.
Yeah, check us out, runonflux.com. If you want to play with Flux AI, it's AI, runonflux.com. If you follow us on Twitter, we're very, very active there, or X, I guess it's called now. And that is at runonflux. And if you want to just listen to the rantings of a crazy old man, it's at DAK_Flux. And I always have something good to add to the show. You can also check me out. I'm a Forbes contributor. So if you check me out on the Forbes Tech Committee, you'll see that I publish regularly about, DePIN, AI, and so on and so forth.
Amazing. Daniel, thank you so much again for coming on the podcast. And I'm sure we'll chat very soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's discussion, brought to you by the embedded blockchain Minima, the only layer 1 blockchain lean and compact enough to run a full node on chip or on any mobile IoT device. If you're new to DePIN, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter to stay up to date. Thank you so much for watching again, and we'll catch you in the next episode.